I'm Emma Wilson, and I'm 22 years old today, sitting in my dorm room at Johns Hopkins University where I'm finishing my biomedical engineering degree on a full scholarship that covers everything from my tuition to my textbooks and even provides a monthly stipend. 4 years ago, I never would have imagined being here, especially not after that gut-wrenching afternoon when I discovered my college fund had been drained to pay for my brother's extravagant wedding. I still remember the way my hands trembled as I held those bank statements, watching years of my parents' promises evaporate in an instant. Growing up, Tyler and I had been close despite the 4-year age gap between us. He would let me tag along with his friends when others would have found their little sister annoying, and he defended me when kids at school were mean. But our parents always made it clear who the star of the family was. Tyler was the golden child, the one whose football games were never missed, whose mediocre report cards were celebrated with dinner out, while my perfect grades were met with distracted nods and, "That's what we expect from you, Emma." I thought my academic achievements would eventually earn their respect and support. I believed them when they said they were saving for my education, when they called it Emma's Future Fund, and made a big show of depositing money on my birthdays. I trusted them when they said my future was secure. I had no idea they viewed that money as theirs to reallocate whenever something more important came along, and in their eyes, Tyler's wedding was infinitely more important than my education. They thought without their financial support, I'd have no choice but to settle for less, maybe community college or a state school if I was lucky. They assumed I'd be dependent on them forever, grateful for whatever scraps of support they decided to throw my way. They were wrong. So very wrong. This is the story of how I went from having my future stolen to creating one so bright they couldn't ignore it, even though they certainly tried to take credit for it in the end. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Pennsylvania, in a 4-bedroom house with a big backyard and a tire swing my dad hung for Tyler when he was 6. Our family looked perfect from the outside. Hard-working father who managed a regional bank branch, mother who worked part-time as a dental hygienist, athletic older brother, and studious younger daughter. But inside those walls, the dynamics were crystal clear from my earliest memories. Tyler was my dad's mini-me, his golden boy, the son who would carry on the Wilson name and make him proud. I was the afterthought, the daughter they hadn't planned for but got anyway. Saturday mornings were for Dad and Tyler's fishing trips or baseball practices, while I stayed home with Mom, who was always quick to remind me how I should be grateful that I at least had a brother who would look out for me. In elementary school, when Tyler struggled with math and reading, my parents hired tutors and spent hours helping him with homework. When I brought home straight A's starting in 1st grade, the response was usually, "That's nice, Emma," or "That's what smart girls do." I didn't want special treatment, but some recognition would have been nice. The irony was unmistakable. Tyler got struggling student attention despite average grades, while I received minimal support despite excellence. The summer I turned 10, my parents made a big show at my birthday dinner about starting Emma's Future Fund. My dad explained how they'd be saving for my college education, since smart girls like you will go to expensive schools. It was the first time I felt truly seen by them. I was so moved that I started adding my own money, birthday checks from grandparents, the $5 I earned weeding Mrs. Peterson's garden, and later, part of my paychecks from my job at the local library. Each time I added money, I'd proudly tell my parents, and they'd nod approvingly, sometimes adding a $20 bill of their own while saying, "We're securing your future, Emma." Meanwhile, Tyler's expenses seemed limitless. When he wanted to go to hockey camp, they found the money. When he needed a car for his 16th birthday, a slightly used Ford appeared in the driveway with a giant bow. When his college grades weren't good enough to maintain his small scholarship, they covered the difference without question. I told myself it would be my turn someday. I believed that if I just kept achieving, kept being the perfect daughter, straight A's, no dating troubles, No sneaking out like Tyler had. Eventually, they'd look at me with the same pride they reserved for my brother. I thought my academic success would be my ticket to finally earning their full attention and approval. I didn't know then that their definition of success had nothing to do with academics and everything to do with fulfilling traditional expectations. And in their eyes, Tyler's wedding would be the ultimate achievement, far outweighing any degree I might earn. By junior year of high school, I was on track to be valedictorian. My GPA was perfect, I was taking every AP class available, and I'd already scored in the top percentile on my PSAT. Teachers were starting to pull me aside to talk about my bright future and unlimited potential. It was during AP Biology that I discovered my passion for biomedical engineering. We were studying cellular regeneration, and something just clicked for me. I could see myself developing new technologies to help people heal, creating artificial tissues or advanced prosthetics that could change lives. For the first time, I wasn't just studying to please others or to maintain my perfect record. I was genuinely excited about where my education could take me. I spent hours researching programs, creating spreadsheets comparing MIT, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, and other top schools. I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, occasionally sharing fascinating facts about cutting-edge research or breakthrough technologies with my parents, who would nod distractedly before changing the subject to Tyler's new job at the insurance company or his girlfriend Melissa, whom they adored. Melissa came from the kind of family my parents desperately wanted to be associated with. Her father owned a successful construction company. Her mother was on the hospital board. They belonged to the country club. When Tyler announced their engagement during his senior year of college, my parents were ecstatic. "This is the best thing that could happen to our family," my mother gushed, while my father clapped Tyler on the back so hard he nearly knocked him over. I was happy for my brother, truly, I was. But I couldn't help noticing how my parents never reacted that way to any of my achievements. Mrs. Collins, my guidance counselor, became my biggest advocate. She saw my potential and encouraged me to aim high, assuring me that with my grades and test scores, scholarships were definitely possible. "Don't limit yourself, Emma," she'd say. "You have what it takes to go anywhere you want." Still, I knew the reality of financing an elite education. Even with scholarships, there would be gaps, which is why my college fund was so important. One evening, I overheard my parents in the kitchen discussing wedding costs. "We could use part of Emma's college fund," my mother suggested in a hushed tone. "She'll get scholarships anyway, and we can replace it before she needs it." My father's response made my blood run cold. "It's not like she's going to those fancy schools she keeps talking about. State college is good enough and much more practical." The next day was my regional science fair, where my project on targeted drug delivery systems was competing for top honors. I won first place, which qualified me for the state competition, a huge accomplishment that could strengthen my college applications. My parents weren't there to see it. They had gone with Tyler and Melissa to tour potential wedding venues. When I showed them my medal and certificate at dinner, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," before immediately launching into excited chatter about the beautiful estate they'd visited where Tyler and Melissa could have the perfect spring wedding. I tried multiple times to discuss my college plans with them directly. "I need to know exactly what financial support I can count on," I explained as rationally as possible. "The applications ask for this information, and I need to be strategic. About financial aid?" My father would wave his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about all that now. We've been saving for years. When the time comes, we'll figure it out." But as my senior year approached and Tyler's wedding plans became increasingly elaborate, a knot of anxiety grew in my stomach. Something wasn't right, and deep down, I was beginning to suspect that the future my parents had promised to secure for me was already being spent on flower arrangements and champagne fountains. September of senior year arrived, and with it came the college application season. My list of target schools was finalized, my essays were being polished, and all that remained was completing the financial information sections. I needed specific numbers about my college fund to accurately reflect my financial situation on applications, especially for need-based scholarships. Mom, Dad, I really need to sit down and go over the college fund details this weekend, I said one Thursday evening. My father barely looked up from his phone. Not this weekend, Emma. We're meeting with the caterer and the band on Saturday, and Sunday is the menu tasting. This had become a pattern. Every request to discuss my college finances was met with a delay or an excuse related to wedding planning. The FAFSA deadline is coming up, I persisted. I need accurate information. My mother patted my hand. Just estimate for now, sweetie. We can adjust later if needed. By late October, I was getting desperate. Early decision deadlines were approaching, and I still had no concrete information. Then, on a Saturday when my parents were out visiting, the wedding venue again with Tyler and Melissa, I decided to look for the information myself. It wasn't snooping, I reasoned, since it was my college fund. I deserved to know. In my father's home office, I found a folder labeled Emma's Education. In the filing cabinet, my heart pounded as I opened it, expecting to find statements showing years of accumulated savings, perhaps $80,000 or more based on what they'd implied over the years. Instead, I found bank statements showing a balance that made me sink into my father's leather chair in shock. The account that supposedly held my future showed a balance of $5,142.19. I frantically flipped through the statements going back several months. In January, the balance had been $89,154.33. Then came a withdrawal of $30,000 in February labeled venue deposit. Another $25,000 disappeared in April for catering and photographer. Smaller withdrawals followed throughout the summer. $8,000 for wedding dress, $12,000 for honeymoon package, and other wedding expenses. My entire future had been spent on a single day for my brother. When my parents returned home that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table with the statements spread out before me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging inside me. My mother at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. My father, however, immediately went on the defensive. "You had no right to go through our personal documents," he said, his face reddening. "That's an invasion of privacy." "Privacy? These are statements for my college fund. The money you promised was for my education," I said, my voice beginning to shake. "Where is it? What happened to the almost $90,000 that was supposed to be there?" After a moment of tense silence, my mother spoke. "Emma, you have to understand. Tyler's wedding is a priority for the whole family. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event." My father nodded. "The Hamiltons are important people in this community. We couldn't have their daughter getting married in some cheap venue with a buffet dinner. It reflects on all of us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And my education? My future? Does that not reflect on you too?" My father's expression hardened. "Don't be melodramatic. You can get student loans like most people, or start at community college. Tyler will help you out once he's established in his career." The casual way they dismissed years of promises left me breathless. "Tyler will help me? So not only have you spent my money, but now I'm supposed to be financially dependent on my brother?" My mother reached for my hand, which I pulled away. "Emma, please try to understand. This was a family decision. A family decision that no one bothered to include me in," I replied, gathering the statements. "You've been lying to me for years. You let me believe I had a secure future while you were planning to spend it all along." My father stood up, his patience clearly at an end. "That's enough, Emma. Sometimes in life, you don't get everything you want. You're smart enough to figure something out. Your brother needed this more than you need some fancy degree." As I left the kitchen, the full weight of the betrayal crashed over me. They had never seen my education as a priority. My achievements, my dreams, my carefully planned future, none of it mattered as much as one lavish day for their favorite child. That night, lying in bed with tears streaming into my pillow, I made a silent vow to myself. I would find my own way forward. I would never again count on my parents for anything, and somehow I would build a future so bright and successful that they would be forced to recognize what they had so carelessly thrown away. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and disbelief. I cried until I had no tears left, then stared at my ceiling for hours, replaying years of memories and seeing them in a harsh new light. Every "we're saving for your future" had been a lie. Every "don't worry, we've got you covered" had been empty. Sleep became elusive and food tasteless. I went through the motions at school, maintaining my outward appearance of the perfect student while inside I felt like I was drowning. On the 4th day after my discovery, I made an appointment with Mrs. Collins. I needed guidance from someone who actually cared about my future. When I told her everything, she listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "Emma, what your parents did was wrong, but it doesn't have to define your future. This is a setback, not the end of your dreams." We spent the next 2 hours developing a comprehensive plan. The timing was challenging. Many scholarship deadlines had already passed, and the most prestigious full-ride opportunities typically required months of preparation. "We're going to have to work twice as hard now," Mrs. Collins said, pulling out a calendar. "You'll need perfect SAT scores, not just excellent ones. Your personal essays will need to be compelling enough to stand out among thousands. And we'll need to find you additional extracurriculars that showcase your commitment to biomedical engineering." I threw myself into SAT prep with a fervor bordering on obsession, studying until my eyes burned each night. My practice scores were already in the top percentile, but I needed perfection. I couldn't afford even a single missed question. Maintaining my valedictorian status wasn't enough anymore. I needed to take my academic achievements to another level. Through Mrs. Collins, I connected with Dr. Patel, a professor at the local community college who was conducting research on biodegradable polymers for medical applications. I offered to volunteer in his lab after school and on weekends, earning a research assistant position that would strengthen my applications. I also began volunteering at the hospital on Sundays, shadowing nurses and doctors in various departments, gaining valuable healthcare exposure that would support my biomedical engineering aspirations. At home, I maintained a facade of having accepted my situation. When my parents mentioned community college options or suggested I look into less expensive state schools, I nodded non-committally. "I'm considering all my options," I would say before retreating to my room to work on scholarship applications. I applied to 12 schools with strong financial aid programs, carefully crafting each application to highlight different aspects of my achievements and aspirations. I wrote and rewrote my personal essays dozens of times, each version more compelling than the last. I secured glowing recommendation letters from teachers, Dr. Patel, and even the hospital's chief of surgery, who had been impressed by my questions during a shadowing session. All of this I kept secret from my family. They were too busy with wedding preparations to notice the late nights, the weekends spent in the lab instead of at home, the steady stream of official-looking mail that I intercepted before they could see it. My mother occasionally asked if I was making progress on my college plans, clearly expecting me to settle for something modest and local. "Yes, I'm figuring things out," I would reply, the partial truth burning in my throat. As Tyler's wedding drew closer, the emotional distance between my parents and me grew wider. I stopped sharing my thoughts, my achievements, my daily experiences with them. I smiled when appropriate, answered questions when asked, and otherwise lived like a ghost in my own home, counting down the days until I could escape. The hurt never lessened, but my determination grew stronger with each passing day. every time I overheard a conversation about the wedding flowers costing more than expected or the premium open bar package being absolutely necessary, I channeled my anger into another hour of studying, another scholarship application, another step toward independence. My parents had taken my financial security, but they couldn't take my intelligence, my work ethic, or my resolve to create a future entirely of my own making. The 6 months leading up to Tyler and Melissa's wedding were filled with endless planning sessions, tastings, fittings, and family discussions that inevitably excluded my input while requiring my presence. "Emma, you'll need to come for your bridesmaid dress fitting this Saturday," my mother announced one evening, not as a request, but as a directive. "I have a research session with Dr. Patel that day," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. My mother's expression hardened. "This is your brother's wedding, Emma. Your dress needs to be fitted. The research can wait." I sat through that fitting and countless other wedding-related activities with a plastic smile, mentally calculating how each expense translated to lost tuition. The bridesmaids' dresses alone cost $420 each, almost half a credit hour at some state schools, the custom-designed wedding cake. That was a semester's worth of textbooks. The luxury venue with its manicured gardens and crystal chandeliers. That could have covered a year of room and board. Every time the wedding planner mentioned a necessary upgrade, or Melissa's mother insisted on an additional extravagance that my parents quickly agreed to, I felt physically ill. One night, after a particularly lavish pre-wedding dinner where my parents spent over $1,000 on wine alone, I finally managed to get Tyler alone. We stood on the restaurant's outdoor patio, the cool evening air a relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside. "Tyler, do you know where the money for all this is coming from?" I asked quietly, watching his expression carefully. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. "Mom and Dad said they've been saving for a long time for this." "They've been saving for my college education," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "They emptied my college fund for your wedding. Nearly $90,000 gone." Tyler's face paled, but his response disappointed me deeply. "Emma, I'm sorry, but that's between you and them. It's not my decision where they get the money from." I stared at him, this brother who had once been my protector. "You're benefiting from it. This whole elaborate production is happening because they chose you over me. Again." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly distressed but not enough to take action. "Look, after Melissa and I get settled, I'll help you out. I promise. Like you promised to help me with that science project when I was 12? Or like you promised to talk to Dad about letting me use the car for my junior prom." My voice shook with the effort of keeping it low. "Your promises don't mean much, Tyler." He looked wounded. "That's not fair. This is different." "You're right. This is my entire future we're talking about, not some school project. But you're still choosing the path of least resistance." I turned to go back inside, then paused. "By the way, I don't want your money. I don't want to be dependent on anyone in this family ever again." The day before the wedding brought everything to a boiling point. I was helping arrange welcome bags in the hotel suite when my mother criticized my attitude for the dozenth time that week. "Emma, I don't understand why you can't just be happy for your brother. This constant cloud of negativity is affecting everyone." Something in me snapped. Maybe I'd be happier if my parents hadn't stolen my future to pay for centerpieces and monogrammed napkins. The suite went silent. My father set down the bag he was holding and turned to me, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough. We have given you everything, Emma. A comfortable home, clothes on your back, support for all your academic nonsense. And this is the gratitude we get?" My mother joined in, her voice tight with restrained emotion. "We raised you better than this. You should be grateful for what you have instead of being jealous of your brother's happiness." I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Grateful? For what exactly? For the lies about saving for my education? For always making me feel second best? For stealing my college fund without even having the decency to tell me? My father pointed toward the door. Either adjust your attitude right now or leave. We won't have you ruining this weekend for everyone with your selfishness. I looked between them, these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and saw nothing but annoyance that I had dared to inconvenience them with my valid feelings. I'll be at the wedding, I said quietly. I'll smile for the photos. I'll give the toast I wrote. I'll dance with the groomsmen you paired me with, but don't for a second think that changes anything between us. The wedding day itself was a masterclass in emotional performance. I helped Melissa with her veil, smiled in countless photographs, and stood obediently at the altar while internally cataloging the cost of every flower arrangement and string quartet musician. During the reception, I watched my parents work the room, basking in compliments about the magical event they had created. My father's toast to the couple went on for nearly 10 minutes, filled with emotional anecdotes about Tyler's childhood, achievements, and his bright future with his beautiful bride. When he mentioned how proud he was of both my children, it was with barely a glance in my direction, a token acknowledgement that felt worse than being forgotten entirely. The breaking point came during the dessert course, when I overheard my mother talking to my Aunt Susan at the next table. "What about Emma's college plans?" Susan asked. "She's such a smart girl. I always thought she'd go somewhere prestigious." My mother lowered her voice, but not enough. "She'll be attending community college in the fall." Between us, she didn't try hard enough for scholarships. We told her she needed to apply early, but you know how teenagers are. Always thinking there's plenty of time until suddenly there isn't. I sat frozen, fork suspended midway to my mouth, as my mother rewrote history to make my predicament my own fault. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about money. This was about a lifetime of being devalued, dismissed, and now deliberately misrepresented. As I looked around at the opulent reception, the ice sculpture catching the light, the tower of champagne glasses, the guest favors that cost more than a week's groceries, I made a promise to myself. I would not only succeed despite them, I would succeed in a way so undeniable that they could never rewrite that narrative. And I would do it completely on my own terms. January brought a flurry of early action responses. Acceptances from good schools arrived, but with financial aid packages that fell far short of what I needed. "Congratulations on your acceptance to University of Pennsylvania," one letter read, offering me a $12,000 annual scholarship that would barely dent the $60,000 yearly cost of attendance. Similar scenarios played out with other universities, academic acceptances paired with financial impossibilities. My carefully concealed hope began to fray around the edges. Tyler and Melissa had returned from their 3-week European honeymoon, full of stories about Parisian cafes and Mediterranean cruises. Not once did Tyler mention his promise to help with my education. When he and Melissa purchased a new construction home in an upscale neighborhood, with generous help from both sets of parents, as my mother proudly told anyone who would listen, I knew for certain that any assistance from that quarter was a fantasy. By February, I had nearly resigned myself to the community college path, consoling myself with the possibility of transferring after 2 years if I could save enough from working full-time alongside my studies. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, an email notification changed everything. "Dear Ms. Wilson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a finalist for the Johns Hopkins Hodson Trust Scholarship, a full tuition award given to exceptional students demonstrating both academic excellence and significant financial need." The email went on to invite me to an intensive 2-day interview process in Baltimore the following weekend. I read and reread the message at least 20 times, afraid it might somehow vanish if I looked away. I immediately called Mrs. Collins, who let out an actual cheer when I told her, "This is it, Emma. This is exactly the opportunity you deserve." The Hodson is one of the most prestigious full-ride scholarships in the country. They only select about 10 students each year from thousands of applicants. The logistics were challenging. I needed to get to Baltimore without my parents asking questions. Mrs. Collins came through again, coordinating with my research mentor, Dr. Patel, to create a cover story about a special weekend laboratory program at the community college. That weekend, while my parents thought I was conducting experiments across town, I was actually in Baltimore, navigating a series of rigorous interviews with professors, administrators, and current scholarship recipients. The final interview was with Dr. Eleanor Hodges, the scholarship committee chair. "Your application is quite compelling, Emma," she said, reviewing my file. "Perfect academic record, exceptional test scores, meaningful research experience. But what truly stands out is your personal essay about resilience and self-reliance." She looked up at me. "Would you mind telling me more about the circumstances that shaped your perspective on independence?" For a moment, I hesitated. I had been careful in my essay to describe my situation in general terms, focusing on my response to adversity rather than blaming my parents outright. But sitting there, faced with this potential lifeline to my dreams, I decided that complete honesty was necessary. My parents promised to save for my education throughout my childhood. I began, my voice steady despite the emotion beneath. Last fall, I discovered they had spent nearly all of my college fund, about $90,000, on my brother's wedding without telling me. When confronted, they suggested community college or loans, and implied that my educational aspirations were less important than family social standing. Dr. Hodges listened intently, her expression thoughtful rather than pitying. "And how did you respond to this discovery?" "Initially with hurt and anger," I admitted, "but then with determination. I researched every scholarship opportunity still available, intensified my academic efforts, secured meaningful research experience, and developed a plan to achieve my goals independently. I'm not here because I want anyone to feel sorry for me. I'm here because I believe in my ability to contribute meaningfully to Johns Hopkins and eventually to the field of biomedical engineering." She nodded slowly. "Resilience isn't about never falling down, Ms. Wilson. It's about how you get back up. Thank you for your candor." The longest week of my life followed as I waited for their decision, checking my email obsessively between classes and late into the night. Then, on a Friday afternoon while I sat alone in the school library, the call came. "Ms. Wilson, this is Dr. Hodges from Johns Hopkins. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been awarded the Hodson Trust Scholarship, covering full tuition, room, board, books, and a research stipend for all 4 years of your undergraduate education, provided you maintain academic excellence." Time seemed to stop as the words registered. "Thank you," I managed to whisper, my vision blurring with tears. "Thank you so much for this opportunity. I promise you won't regret your decision." The committee was extremely impressed with your academic achievements, but even more so with your perseverance in the face of significant obstacles, Dr. Hodges continued. "We believe you exemplify exactly the kind of student this scholarship was designed to support." After we concluded the call, I sat motionless, letting the reality wash over me. I had done it. Without my parents' support, without the money they had promised me, I had secured my future. I had a full ride to one of the top biomedical engineering programs in the country. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to limit my options, my parents had ultimately pushed me to achieve something far greater than I might have otherwise. I told only Mrs. Collins and Dr. Patel about my scholarship, swearing them to secrecy until all the paperwork was finalized and irrevocable. For weeks, I carried this precious secret close, protecting it from any potential interference. At home, I continued the charade of researching community college options, occasionally mentioning possible scholarships to deflect suspicion. My parents, preoccupied with Tyler and Melissa's housewarming party, barely registered my comments. The final confirmation from Johns Hopkins arrived in late March. Thick packet, official scholarship certificate, housing information, and course registration details. Everything was set. No one could take this away from me now. It was time to reveal my success to the family who had underestimated me so completely. I chose a Sunday dinner for my revelation, when Tyler and Melissa would be joining us for the weekly family meal. I wanted witnesses to prevent any attempt to rewrite what would happen next. I'd been unusually quiet all day, helping my mother prepare the roast and set the table without my usual detached politeness. She noticed, commenting that it was nice to see you participating in family activities again. If only she knew. We were midway through the main course, my father talking about a promotion at work, when I seized a brief pause in the conversation. "I have some news to share," I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of interest. "I've decided where I'll be going to college in the fall." My mother set down her fork. "Emma, we've discussed this. Community college is the sensible option for your first 2 years. Maybe after that, if your grades are good and you've saved—" "I'll be attending Johns Hopkins University," I interrupted, taking a sip of water to hide my trembling hands. "I've been awarded the Hodson Trust Scholarship. It covers everything: tuition, room and board, books, plus a research stipend. It's worth over $300,000 over 4 years." The stunned silence was everything I had imagined and more. My father recovered first, his expression shifting rapidly from shock to something like calculation. "Well, that's wonderful news, Emma. I always knew you could do it if you applied yourself." My mother nodded enthusiastically, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Johns Hopkins. That's one of your dream schools. All your hard work paid off." The speed with which they pivoted from dismissing my ambitions to claiming credit for my success was breathtaking. Tyler looked genuinely pleased, if a bit confused by the sudden announcement. "Congratulations, Em. That's incredible." Melissa smiled politely, though I could see her mentally recalculating her understanding of family dynamics. "When did all this happen?" my father asked, his tone suggesting he was slightly hurt to have been left out of the process. "How did we not know you were applying for such a prestigious scholarship?" I met his gaze directly. "I began the process after discovering you had spent my college fund on Tyler's wedding. I didn't tell you because, frankly, I didn't trust you to support my efforts." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My mother's smile faltered. "Emma, that's not fair. We've always supported your education." "No," I replied calmly. "You supported the idea of my education as long as it didn't compete with Tyler's needs or wants. When it came to actual financial support you had promised me for years, you chose his wedding over my future." My father's face reddened. "We've been through this. Sometimes families have to make difficult decisions about priorities. And I was never a priority." I finished for him. "I understand that now, which is why I made sure my future was secured in a way you couldn't touch or reallocate." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Emma, I don't think that's entirely—" "Did you know they spent my college fund on your wedding?" I asked him, directly. His silence and averted eyes told me everything. "You did know, and you went along with it, even after I confronted you." "It wasn't my place to tell them how to spend their money," he mumbled. "It wasn't their money," I said, my composure finally cracking. "It was promised to me. Some of it was literally my money. Birthday gifts, summer job earnings. They let me believe I was securing my future when they never intended to follow through." My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "Emma, please. We can discuss this privately later. There's no need to upset everyone's dinner." "There won't be a later discussion," I informed her. "I'm telling you now that I've accepted the scholarship. I'll be moving to Baltimore in August. I've already arranged summer housing near campus so I can start in the research lab early." My father frowned. That's ridiculous. You should live at home until you leave for school. Save your money. I'm not staying here, I said simply. I've made other arrangements. With what money? He demanded. I've been saving from my library job, I explained. And the scholarship includes a summer stipend since I'll be working in the biomedical engineering lab. My mother's expression crumpled. But we'll hardly see you before you leave. I thought we'd have the whole summer together. The audacity of her assumption that I'd want to spend time with them after everything that had happened ignited something fierce inside me. Like you spent time with me during my science competitions, or my honor society induction, or any of the dozen important moments you missed because Tyler's needs always came first. Years of accumulated hurt poured out. My entire life I've watched you prioritize Tyler, his sports, his average grades, his wedding, his house. You drained my college fund without a second thought, then lied to family members about me not trying hard enough for scholarships. Why? Would I want to spend more time with people who value me so little? My father stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. That's enough. How dare you speak to us this way after everything we've done for you? You've always been self-centered, Emma, always keeping score instead of appreciating your family. This scholarship has clearly gone to your head. I remained seated, oddly calm in the face of his anger. What exactly have you done for me that I should be grateful for? Providing basic necessities? That's the legal minimum required of parents. Supporting my academic nonsense, as you called it? You've barely acknowledged my achievements. Saving for my education? We both know how that turned out. My mother was openly crying now. Emma, please, we love you. We've always wanted the best for you. The best for me was the future you promised me, then stole, I replied, my voice softening slightly at her tears. I secured that future myself, no thanks to either of you. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the confrontation. I'm staying with Charlotte until graduation. Her parents have offered me their guest room. Charlotte had been my best friend since elementary school, and her parents had always treated me like a second daughter. My father's face darkened further. You most certainly are not. You're 17 and you'll stay in this house until you're legally an adult. I turned 18 last month, I reminded him. My birthday dinner? You both left early for Tyler and Melissa's housewarming party. I picked up my purse from the back of my chair. I packed my essential belongings this morning while you were at church. I'll come back for the rest when you're at work this week. I turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Thank you for dinner. The roast was excellent. Later that night, after settling into Charlotte's family's guest room, I received dozens of texts and calls from my mother, alternating between tearful pleas to come home and sharp recriminations about my cruel behavior. My father called once, leaving a voicemail that was equal parts angry and bewildered, as if he genuinely couldn't understand why I would choose to leave. Tyler texted a single message. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. Too little, too late. As I lay in bed, that night I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication and grief, freedom and loss, determination and uncertainty. I had stood up for myself and secured my future, but at the cost of whatever remained of my family relationships. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, the prevailing feeling was one I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I slept through the night without nightmares or anxiety. My future was mine alone, built by my own hands, secured by my own efforts. No one could take that away from me now. Moving into my dorm at Johns Hopkins that August was a surreal experience. Unlike many freshmen tearfully hugging parents goodbye, I arrived alone, having taken the train from Pennsylvania with just 2 suitcases containing everything I owned. My roommate Lindsay arrived with both parents, a younger sister, and what seemed like enough belongings to furnish a small apartment. They helped her set up, hung photos on her wall, and made her bed with coordinated linens her mother had carefully selected. When they finally left after extracting numerous promises to call home regularly, Lindsay turned to me with curiosity. "Your family coming later?" I arranged my books on the shelf, considering how to respond. "No, it's just me. We're not close." Something in my tone must have discouraged further questions, because Lindsay simply nodded and offered to help me hang my single poster, a vintage diagram of the human nervous system I'd found at a thrift store. Those first few weeks were a stunning contrast of academic exhilaration and emotional isolation. The biomedical engineering program was everything I'd hoped for and more. The laboratories were state-of-the-art, the professors brilliant and engaging, the curriculum challenging in exactly the way I'd always craved. I threw myself into my studies with single-minded focus, determined to prove the scholarship committee right in their decision to invest in me. But while I was thriving academically, the adjustment to college life without any family support was harder than I'd anticipated. Lindsay would receive care packages filled with homemade cookies and encouraging notes. Other freshmen went home for long weekends or had parents visit for dinner. My mother texted occasionally with awkward attempts at conversation that I answered politely but briefly. My father hadn't contacted me since I left home. As midterms approached, the pressure intensified. One night, after studying until 3 a.m. for a particularly difficult organic chemistry exam, I found myself sitting on the floor of the dorm shower, hot water pouring over me as I sobbed uncontrollably. It wasn't about the exam. I was well prepared. It was about the accumulated stress of navigating this transition entirely alone, of having no safety net if I failed, of building a life from scratch while processing the family trauma I'd tried so hard to compartmentalize. The next day, eyes still puffy from crying, I visited the student counseling center and signed up for therapy. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. Dr. Rivera, my therapist, helped me understand that achievement wasn't enough. I needed to process the hurt, anger, and grief I'd been suppressing. "You've been in survival mode," she explained. "That works in the short term, but eventually, you need to heal." Over the next months, I slowly began building a support system. Lindsay became a genuine friend rather than just a roommate. I joined a study group for my core engineering classes, where I met Zach and Priya, who would become two of my closest friends. Professor Chen, who taught my Introduction to Biomaterials course, took an interest in my work and invited me to assist with her research on synthetic tissue scaffolds. When Thanksgiving break arrived, I faced a decision. My mother had sent several messages asking if I would come home for the holiday. "Tyler and Melissa will be here," she wrote, as if that might be an incentive rather than a deterrent. After discussing it with Dr. Rivera, I decided to decline. "I've made plans to stay on campus and work in the lab," I responded, which was true, if not the complete reason. Instead, I joined a Friendsgiving dinner hosted by international students who couldn't go home, finding unexpected connection with others who were forging their own paths far from family. Christmas was harder. The campus emptied, and despite invitations from both Lindsay and Priya to join their family celebrations, I chose to stay at Hopkins, one of only a handful of students remaining in the dorms. On Christmas morning, I woke to an email from Tyler with the subject line, "I miss you." The message was brief, but seemed genuine. "Emma, I know I failed you as a brother. I should have stood up to Mom and Dad about the college fund. I was selfish, and took the easy way out. I miss having you in my life. If you're ever willing to talk, I'm here." I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process my complicated feelings about my brother. In the quiet days between Christmas and New Year's, I reflected on whether I wanted any relationship with my family moving forward and what boundaries would be necessary if I did. January brought the spring semester and news that my research with Professor Chen had yielded promising results that might lead to a published paper, a rare achievement for a freshman. When I called Mrs. Collins to share this news, she was ecstatic. "I knew you would thrive there, Emma. I'm so proud of you." Her unconditional support reminded me that family isn't always defined by blood. In March, I finally responded to Tyler's email, agreeing to a phone call. The conversation was awkward at first, but gradually became more natural as he updated me on his life and asked thoughtful questions about my studies. "I told Mom and Dad they were wrong about you," he said near the end of our call. "I told them they should be proud of what you've accomplished instead of being hurt that you did it without them." I appreciated his advocacy, even if it came late. "I'm not trying to punish them," I explained. "I'm protecting myself while I build a life that's mine." We ended the call with a tentative plan to talk again the following month, a small step toward redefining our relationship as adults, rather than as the golden son and afterthought daughter. When summer arrived, I was offered a prestigious research position in Professor Chen's lab, a paid opportunity that would strengthen my resume and allow me to stay in Baltimore. My parents learned about this through Tyler and sent a joint email, congratulating me and suggesting they visit campus to see where you're living and meet your professors. I politely declined, not yet ready for that step. My mother responded with hurt accusations about me shutting them out, while my father sent a separate message about how I was still punishing them for one mistake. Through therapy, I had learned to recognize these tactics, the guilt trips, the minimization of harm, the refusal to truly acknowledge the pattern of favoritism that had defined my childhood. I didn't engage with their defensiveness, instead setting clear boundaries about what kind of contact I was comfortable with at this stage. During a family reunion that summer, my Aunt Susan called to tell me that my parents were talking about my full scholarship to Johns Hopkins, as if they had orchestrated it, describing how they had always encouraged Emma's scientific interests and made sure she applied for the right opportunities. The irony might have angered me once, but now I found it almost amusing. My success was so undeniable that they had created a revisionist history where they supported me all along. I didn't bother to correct them through the family grapevine. The truth was evident in the fact that I hadn't been home in nearly a year. By the start of sophomore year, I had found my stride. The research with Professor Chen had indeed led to a publication where my name appeared third in the author list, an extraordinary accomplishment for an undergraduate. I had a solid friend group, a promising academic trajectory, and growing confidence in my ability to navigate life independently. I had also begun a cautious reconnection with Tyler on my own terms, occasionally video chatting and even meeting, once when he was in Baltimore for a business trip. He seemed genuinely happy for my success and regretful about his role in the family dynamics that had led to our estrangement. My parents remained more problematic, still fluctuating between attempts at reconciliation and subtle blame for the distance between us. I maintained limited contact, responding to messages when I felt emotionally equipped to do so, but not initiating communication or accepting invitations to visit. Dr. Rivera helped me understand that this wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about recognizing that some relationships can only be healthy with significant boundaries. As the semester progressed, I received an unexpected email from the Hodson Scholarship Committee, inviting me to speak at a donor appreciation event about how the scholarship had impacted my education. As I prepared my remarks, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point, I realized how much I had grown not just academically but emotionally over the past year. The betrayal that had once threatened to derail my future had ultimately propelled me toward greater resilience, self-reliance, and clarity about my own worth. I was building a life that reflected my values and aspirations, surrounded by people who recognized and supported my potential. The scholarship hadn't just secured my education, it had given me the freedom to discover who I could become without the weight of family expectations and limitations. As I approach graduation, sitting here in my dorm room surrounded by textbooks and research papers, it's hard to believe how far I've come from that devastated 17-year-old who discovered her college fund had been drained. 4 years at Johns Hopkins have transformed me in ways I never anticipated. Academically, I've exceeded even my own ambitious expectations. My research on biocompatible polymers for artificial tissue scaffolds has been published in 2 peer-reviewed journals, a rare achievement for an undergraduate. I've been accepted to MIT's doctoral program with a full fellowship, allowing me to continue my education without financial constraints. Professors who once intimidated me are now mentors and colleagues who seek my input on research questions. But the most significant growth hasn't been academic at all. It's been personal. Last year, I established the First Generation Support Initiative, a program that helps scholarship students from challenging family backgrounds navigate the complexities of college life without traditional support systems. We provide mentorship, holiday housing, professional clothing for interviews, and emergency funds for unexpected expenses. Working with these students has been profoundly healing, transforming my own painful experience into something that benefits others. "You've created the support system you wished you had," Dr. Rivera noted in one of our final therapy sessions before she relocated to another university. She was right. My relationship with my family has evolved into something I can manage on my own terms. Tyler and I have built a genuine adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than the unbalanced dynamics of our childhood. He and Melissa now have 2 children, and while I'm not the highly involved aunt I might have been under different circumstances, I do send thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts. My interactions with my parents remain more complicated. After my sophomore year, I agreed to meet them for dinner when they visited Baltimore, a carefully controlled reintroduction conducted in neutral territory. The conversation was strained, with my mother making several attempts to reminisce about family, memories that didn't align with my experience. "Remember how we always encouraged your science projects?" she asked, seemingly oblivious to the revisionist history she was creating. My father, to his credit, was more subdued, watching me carefully as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Since then, we've established a limited relationship. I call on major holidays and their birthdays. I respond to texts and emails within a reasonable time frame. I visited home once last year, staying for exactly 2 days, sleeping in what had once been my bedroom, but now functions as a home office with a pull-out sofa. The distance between us isn't primarily physical, it's emotional. A necessary boundary I maintain to protect my well-being. They still don't fully understand what they did wrong, or how deeply their actions affected me. In their minds, they made a difficult financial decision that I overreacted to, rather than recognizing it as the culmination of a lifetime of being devalued. I've accepted that they may never truly understand, and that's okay. My healing doesn't depend on their acknowledgement. Last month, I received an unexpected email from my father, a forwarded announcement about a prestigious engineering award I'd received, with a simple message. "I saw this and thought of you. Congratulations." No attempt to take credit, no passive-aggressive, subtext, just recognition of my achievement. It was a small thing, but perhaps an indication that he's beginning to see me as my own person, not just an extension of the family unit that failed me. The lesson I've learned most profoundly is about the nature of family itself. Family isn't just about blood relations or legal ties. It's about who shows up for you, who celebrates your victories and supports you through defeats, who sees your value without needing to compare it to someone else's. My chosen family now includes Lindsay, who remained my roommate all 4 years and knows when to bring coffee and when to give space. Professor Chen, who has become both mentor and friend. Mrs. Collins, who still sends encouraging emails before major exams, and the circle of friends who have seen me at my worst and helped me become my best. When people ask if I regret what happened with my college fund, my answer surprises them. I don't. Not anymore. Had my parents kept their promise, I might have attended a good school with their financial support, remaining in the dysfunctional family dynamic where my worth was always secondary. Instead, their betrayal forced me to forge my own path, one that has led to greater success, independence, and self-knowledge than I might otherwise have found. The scholarship I earned wasn't just a financial award, it was freedom to become the person I was meant to be, unconstrained by others' limited vision of my potential. Looking toward the future as I prepare to begin my doctoral program, I feel neither triumphant nor bitter about proving my parents wrong. Instead, I feel grateful for the unexpected journey that taught me my own strength. The path forward isn't about escaping my past or proving anything to anyone else. It's about continuing to build a life aligned with my values, contributing meaningfully to my field, and maintaining relationships that nurture rather than diminish me. When your expected path disappears from under your feet, you don't just find another road. You learn to build your own. And sometimes, the road you build yourself leads exactly where you were always meant to go. The journey isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. But now I move forward knowing that whatever challenges arise, I have the resilience, support, and self-knowledge to face them on my own terms. My future belongs to me. I built it myself. One decision, one achievement, one boundary at a time, and no one can ever take that away. From my journey of betrayal to triumph, I've learned that sometimes our greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds. When my parents drained my college fund for my brother's wedding, they unknowingly set me on a path to true independence. I discovered that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising stronger after each setback. The most valuable lesson I gained was understanding that we can't control others' actions, only our response to them. Instead of letting bitterness consume me, I channeled my hurt into determination. I learned that sometimes the people who should support us most fail us, but that doesn't determine our worth or potential. I also discovered the true meaning of family. It's not always blood relations, but the people who believe in you, support your dreams, and celebrate your victories without condition. The mentors, friends, and allies who showed up for me became my chosen family, proving that meaningful connections can be built on respect rather than obligation. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that overcoming obstacles on your own builds a special kind of confidence that can never be taken away. Every challenge I faced without my parents' support reinforced my belief in my own capabilities. That self-reliance became my foundation for bigger dreams and bolder choices. Finally, I realized that setting boundaries with toxic family dynamics isn't selfish. It's essential for growth. Creating distance from those who diminished me wasn't about punishment. It was about creating space to become the person I was meant to be. Have you ever had someone who should have supported you let you down in a major way? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from that experience? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey might inspire someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up so others can find it too. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building resilience, subscribe to my channel. I share new stories every week about navigating difficult relationships and finding your own path. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' treatment of you, and sometimes the path that seems most devastating can lead to your greatest strength. You have everything you need within you to create the future you deserve.